Let's go back in time. It's May 1942. Picture the scene. You're at the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland. A young Lieutenant, Edward Ul, is trying to steady this awkward 5-foot-long steel tube on his shoulder. And this thing, it's a mess. It's literally cobbled together from scrap metal, a wooden rifle stock somebody found, and probably a whole lot of hope. And watching him are these high-ranking generals. They are deeply skeptical, and you can't blame them. They have a massive problem. German tanks are rolling across Europe, and they need a solution. This thing that looks like a toy rocket launcher, it just seems completely absurd. But what they don't know is they're about to witness a genuine miracle, one that was born from a literal pile of junk.
So, that brings us to the central question of our story today. How on earth does a goofy musical toy made famous by a comedian connect to a weapon that would eventually strike absolute terror into the hearts of Nazi tank crews? Well, the answer is an incredible story of innovation, desperation, and how sometimes the most complex, impossible problems have the most shockingly simple solutions.
All right, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the impossible problem facing soldiers on the ground. Then, the scrap pile miracle that changed everything. After that, we'll see its dramatic fall from grace and its incredible comeback. And finally, we'll explore the lasting echo of the bazooka and how it still shapes the world today.
So, to really understand why the bazooka was such a game changer, you have to feel the sheer desperation of the moment. We're talking about the early days of World War II. For an American GI on the ground, a German Panzer wasn't just a tank, it was an unstoppable monster. And they had almost nothing in their arsenal that could reliably stop it.
I want you to really try and imagine this. You're an infantryman, you're in a ditch, and that steel beast is rumbling towards you. What's your weapon? A magnetic mine. And what's your tactic? You have to get up, sprint across open ground with machine guns firing at you, and get close enough to physically slap this mine onto the tank's hull. It was less of a tactic and more of, well, a suicide mission. The odds were just astronomically against you. And here's the most frustrating part of it all. The Army actually had a warhead that could kill a tank. It was called the M10-shaped charge. Think of it as a focused jet of molten metal that could just melt right through steel armor. An incredible piece of technology. But there was a fatal flaw. It weighed 3.5 pounds. No soldier on Earth could throw it far enough to be outside the blast radius. So you had this devastating bullet, but absolutely no gun to fire it from safely. The problem truly seemed impossible.
Okay, so this is where the story takes a huge pivot, and it's all thanks to two guys, Captain Leslie Skinner, a career Army officer who had been obsessed with rockets his whole life, and Lieutenant Edward Ul, a young, absolutely brilliant engineer. These were the men tasked with solving this impossible problem, and the solution they found? Well, it wasn't in some high-tech laboratory, it was hiding in plain sight.
So picture this. Lieutenant Ul is just walking past a scrap pile, a graveyard of forgotten, rusted metal parts, and his eye catches something, a simple, discarded steel tube. And in that one instant, something just clicks in his mind. He realizes the inner diameter of that tube is a perfect match for their M10 rocket grenade. The idea that flashes into his head is almost laughably simple. What if we just put the rocket inside the tube? He rushes back to the workshop, grabs the tube, slaps on a wooden stock and some spare parts, and they take it down to the Potomac River for a test. He fires it, and it works. Perfectly. No violent kickback, just a clean, beautiful launch.
Back at the proving ground, the generals are watching Skinner and Ul just repeatedly nail a moving tank target with their new invention. The chief of Army R&D, General Barnes, is so impressed he insists on trying it himself. He shoulders the weapon, he fires, and it's a direct hit. A massive grin just spreads across his face, and he says the line that would give the weapon its name forever. Now you have to understand, Bob Burns was a super famous radio comedian at the time, and his signature comedy prop was this bizarre homemade musical instrument that he called a bazooka. The name was just perfect for this strange-looking but incredibly deadly new weapon, and it stuck.
The generals weren't just impressed, they were completely blown away. So much so that they bypassed almost all of the standard testing protocols. The order came down from the top, we need 5,000 of these, now. The contract went to General Electric, and they were given an absolutely impossible deadline, 30 days. 30 days to mass-produce a weapon that, a month earlier, didn't even exist as an idea. In a race against the clock, they delivered the final shipment with just 89 minutes to spare. The scrap pile miracle was officially on its way to war.
But this is where our story takes a really dramatic and painful turn.
because a weapon born from a moment of genius and rushed into production through sheer will was about to collide with the brutal, unforgiving reality of combat. And that first contact, it was an absolute catastrophe.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It shows a fall from grace that is just swift and brutal. The bazooka was rushed to the front lines in North Africa so fast that the Supreme Commander himself, Dwight Eisenhower, was shocked to hear they were even there. His troops had received zero training on them. For most of those soldiers, the very first time they ever saw a bazooka was when they pried open the shipping crate on a boat, with no manual, no instructions, and no idea what this thing was or how to use it.
And the outcome? It was devastating. After months of intense combat, Army investigators went to find out how the new miracle weapon was doing. They could not find a single soldier who could confirm that the bazooka had actually destroyed an enemy tank. Not one. A big, fat zero. The early rockets were unreliable. The battery-powered ignition system kept failing in the damp air. And without any training, the soldiers who tried to use them just couldn't hit anything. The miracle weapon was a total, embarrassing failure.
But the team back at Aberdeen, Skinner and Ul, they didn't give up. They went back to the drawing board and they methodically fixed every single flaw. They redesigned the rocket itself for better reliability. They made the launcher lighter and improved the sights. They created a better ignition system that could handle moisture. But the most critical fix, the one that changed everything, had nothing to do with the hardware. It was the human element. They created actual standardized training programs to teach soldiers how to use this weapon effectively.
The weapon got its second chance during the invasion of Sicily in July of 1943. And this time, it was different. The paratroopers of the 82nd Airborne, they had been trained. They knew exactly what they were doing. So when they went up against German panzers, including one of the most fearsome tanks of the war, the Tiger, the bazooka finally proved its worth. It worked. It had gone from a complete failure to a celebrated tank-killing success. The comeback was real.
And that success didn't just change the outcome of a few firefights. No, it fundamentally changed the entire psychology of the battlefield. The real legacy of the bazooka wasn't just measured in the number of tanks it destroyed. It was measured in the terror it created.
You know, they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Well, in warfare, it's the sincerest form of validation. After the Germans captured some of these new bazookas, they immediately reverse-engineered their own version. They called it the Panzerschreck, which basically means tank terror. And it was a beast. A bigger caliber, way more penetration. But it was also a lot heavier, and it kicked up this huge cloud of smoke every time it fired, which basically screamed, "Hey, I'm over here, shoot at me." It was a flawed but truly fearsome compliment to the American design.
But the true impact, the real story, comes from this quote. Years after the war, at a veterans reunion, a former German Panther tank commander said this to an American veteran he had once fought against. Just think about that. The fear was worse than the weapon. Before the bazooka, being inside a tank was like being inside a fortress. You felt invincible. After the bazooka, every window, every ditch, every pile of rubble could hide a soldier who could kill you. That constant gnawing fear of an attack from anywhere, that was its greatest effect.
And that legacy, that idea, is everywhere today. The fundamental concept that Skinner and Ul pioneered, giving a single soldier the power to take on a tank, is now a standard, essential piece of equipment for every modern army on the planet. When you see weapons like the RPG-7, the AT-4, or the M72 Law, you have to remember they are all the direct descendants of that simple, forgotten tube that Lieutenant Ul spotted in a scrap pile.
Ultimately, it's just this incredibly powerful reminder that world-changing ideas don't always come from huge, multi-million-dollar research labs. Sometimes the most brilliant breakthroughs come from simply looking at an old problem in a new way, from seeing amazing potential in a pile of ordinary junk. And it really just leaves you with one final thought, one question to ask yourself. What world-changing idea is hiding in your scrap pile?